Okay, that's fine. I've just got 2 iPads set up, so more people can join if they need to. All right, great. So just back to the seminar. So essentially, it's written by Cambridge Assessments now, not by ASA. And it's for the selective test in 2021, it'll still be a paper exam. So they are planning to move it towards a online exam, but it's something where for the current year 5 students, it will still be a paper-based exam. So there will be 3 multiple choice tests and 1 writing section. So it's something where the multiple choice sections will be reading skills, mathematic reasoning skills, and thinking skills. So in terms of the reading skills and mathematical reasoning skills, it's something where the test is, you know, they've been preparing for that already. So most likely they won't go into topics where they haven't covered before. It might just be slightly easier, slightly harder, but it won't be something completely different. But for the thinking skills, it's something that will likely be completely different, mainly because it's a lot of questions in there, such as vocabulary, such as jumbled sentences, such as anagrams. Those type of questions most likely won't be in there anymore. So we'll go through the syllabus. It's not an official syllabus that the government has published at the moment. It's more of a syllabus that the Cambridge Assessments themselves have published. So Cambridge themselves have published the guide in terms of, you know, problem solving skills, critical thinking skills. These are the ones that you need to know. And so that's their syllabus, and most likely will be something similar because it's the same company running it. But the main thing that I stress is the questions that we go through today, it will be much easier than the questions that I'm showing you today, mainly because the ones that are here are straight out of the Cambridge website, but the ones that are that will be in the selective will be written more suitable for the students who are at a year 5 level. So I'll put this up here now, and I'll just quickly get the other one running as well. So if you want to copy that down, just that one's quite an important page to note. These are all the different types of questions that you can expect. So while you're copying it down, the problem solving section is one that's more relevant to the mathematics, things like graphs, tables, charts, things like that. Someone asked if we can have a copy of the PowerPoint. Yes, we'll send that through later. So that's more mathematical based. Now the critical thinking one, that one will be more textual based. So that will give you paragraphs of text which you need to solve the question for. There'll be things like conclusions, drawing a conclusion, identifying the main conclusion, identifying an assumption, having a text with an argument, and then they throw in a bit of extra bit of evidence or information and see how that affects the argument. So it's all quite complex stuff, but we'll go through some examples. I think that will be the best way to figure out how to figure the best way in terms of for you guys to see what it actually looks like. So we'll start off with problem solving. I think that's the one that will be easiest to ease into. So the first one that we all need to have a look at is the relevant selection. So the way that we'll go through it today is I'll let the students who are there look through the questions and attempt them, give it a bit of a go, and then afterwards we'll go through it together to show you how to do it. So in terms of relevant selections, these are questions where there will be a lot of information. So I know there's a table here, but there's actually even more over here, down here. So there will be a lot of information, and the important thing is for the students, sorry, not the parents, but the students to be able to identify the relevant bits of information within the question, and then to answer that particular question. So looking at this one, we have an example here. So this is keep in mind, these are all questions. We haven't made this up. This is directly from the Cambridge Assessments website. For a lot of our Alpha 1 students, I have sent you a Google Drive with the questions in there, with some resources that the Cambridge Assessments have published online for everyone for free for anyone to view. I've just merely collated that into one resource. That one, these are all just questions from there. So yeah, this is exactly what they've released. So looking at the first one, relevant selections, if you're looking at this one, it says, the question is, in order to qualify for a bonus, employees must fulfill certain criteria. So it's relating to a job. So for the kids at home, essentially, if you have a job, you might get paid a certain amount of money per hour. But if you do a really good job, you might get a bonus. And a lot of places, they'll have like a clear criteria or set of rules that you have to meet. And if you, follow those rules or meet those targets or numbers that you need to meet, you get some extra money. So this is what the question says. And you can see here that at this job, you can either get a $1,000 bonus or a $500 bonus, and there's some criteria there. So for example, for the $1,000 bonus, you have to have absences less than 5%. As you can see here, absences less than 5%. You also need to have production targets exceeded by at least 10%. So that just, production targets just simply means how much things that you're producing. So for example, imagine you're working at a factory packing boxes. Say the production target is maybe 10 boxes an hour. If you can pass it by 10%, so if you pack 11 boxes, you've passed your target by 10%, if that's the example that we're going with. And then rejects are less than 5%. So for example, using the same example of packing boxes, maybe if you pack a box and you fold the box wrong, that might get rejected later on. So if you have rejects that are less than 5%, so that means if you have 20 boxes, only one is rejected. So yeah, so that's essentially the criteria. So I'll let the students have a look at that. And I put the question below. Can everyone see the question below? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the question below. Yeah? Yeah, you don't have to see the options because the question is a little bit large, but I'll let you just have a read of it and I'll read through it with you as well. So the question asks, who performed, the work is performed as follows. So here at the top here, you can see some people, they've listed it as, you can see Smith, at the bottom of the page, Jones, Patel, Owololu, McKay, and then it shows you things like the attendance, how much their targets are, and what the product accepted are. So what I'll get the students to do for those at home, I'll give you maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I know at the moment for the GA section, they give you 60 questions in 40 minutes, but I think these type of questions, can't expect you to do it in like 40 seconds. This one, I would expect the student to be able to do it in maybe 1 minute. So have a look at this question. Yep, so up here at the top half of the page, it's what you need to qualify for the bonus. At the bottom is the different people and what their attendance was, what their overproduction was, what were their product accepted percentage, what they were, and then just figure out who qualifies for the bonus. So who gets a bonus? So I'll give everyone about 2 minutes to do that. So I can see a lot of C, Ds, and E's. I think that's enough. So we'll go through this question. All right, so let's go through it. First of all, the correct answer should be D. Just to re-emphasize the point, these type of questions, they're called relevant selection questions. So there will be a lot of information in here, but you only need some. So for example, looking at this question, it says who qualifies for a bonus? So we actually don't really care if they get the it's not dollars, it's pounds because it's a UK exam, but let's just call it dollars just to make things easy. It doesn't really matter who gets the $500 bonus or who gets the $1,000 bonus. All that really matters is that they do get a bonus. So if you look at the $1,000 bonus and the $500 bonus and you compare the two, if you look at it, you essentially just have to get an absence less than 10%. So if you're away for less than 10% of the time, then you'll automatically get the 500 one. And if you do even better, you'll get the $1,000, but we don't really care. So let's have a look at the questions and see who doesn't, right? Who doesn't get the bonus according to attendance. So let's have a look at that. So if we look at it, I'll just have a look at the options. So we have Smith, Jones, Patel, Oololu, and McKay. So you have to get absences less than 10%. So essentially you have to get 9% or less. So if we look at it, that means Jones doesn't get it, right? So Jones, we can cross it out. If you write their names down, you can cross out Jones right away because Jones gets 10% absence, but he has to get absence less than 10%. So that means he doesn't get that bonus. Now, okay, everyone else gets above 10%, has less than 10% absences, so they're away for less than 10% of the time, so they qualify. Let's go to the next one. So production targets met. So the next one is production targets met, okay? So that's something where if you, and then the $1,000 bonus says your production has to be at least 10%. So we don't really care about that. We only care about the $500 bonus because it's easier to get that. So if you get the $500 bonus, you might get the, if you get the $1,000 bonus, you would definitely get the $500 bonus. So we only care about the $500 bonus. So who meets their production target? So if we look at the numbers in the middle column here, right? If we look at the middle column here, who gets the production target, overproduction, so who meets the target? So everyone except for McKay, because McKay got -4. Oololu got 0, so that means he got exactly how much he wanted. If he needed to pack 10 boxes an hour, he packed 10 boxes an hour. He didn't go over, didn't go less, so he met it. Patel got +12, so he did over, and Smith got +5, so he went over, so that means he also qualified. And the last one is rejects are less than 8%. So that means what percent has to be accepted? It has to be less than 8%. That means it has to be 93% more. 93% or more is accepted. So let's have a look at the remaining ones. Smith meets it. Patel meets it. Oololu meets it. McKay and Jones we don't care about because they already got kicked out based on attendance or production targets. So that means the people who get it is Oololu, Patel, and Smith. So your answer will be D. All right, so that's that question. Okay, let's move on to the next question because we've got 10 of these to get through. So the next one is finding procedures. So these type of questions, you have a bit of given information and you have to calculate a required solution. So these actually are very like maths questions. They're very similar to maths questions where you get given some information and just to find the answer. So not very difficult. I think this one's probably one of the easiest ones out of the whole 10 type of questions. There's the example there. Just give it a go. I'll give everyone maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Once you have your answer there, just type it in the chat which one you think it is. So just for those who want me to read the question out, it says 3 thermometers are accurate to within 2 degrees above or below. So that means if one reads 7 degrees, that means the real temp, it might not be the right temperature. A temperature might actually be, it might be 5 degrees, 6 degrees, 7 degrees, 8 degrees, 9 degrees, right? So if it's something is 7 degrees, it can actually be between 5 degrees and 9 degrees, okay? So that's what it's saying. So although the temperature is thermometer is saying 7 degrees, the real temperature could actually be between 5 and 9. Okay, so that's what it's saying. So try the question, type it into the chat. I can see a lot of people putting answers, not quite the right answers. If you put A, think again, it's not A. Okay, I think enough people have put in the answers. So looking at them, a lot of you did get it right, especially after I told you A was not the right answer. The correct answer is actually D. So I'll go through this one with you and I'll draw a diagram. I'll try, I'm teaching off 2 iPads here, so I'll try to draw using 2 hands. So let's go through it. So I explained before what it means by it's accurate within 2 degrees above or below. So it means that if the thermometer shows 7 degrees, it might not be right, but it definitely is not lower than 2 degrees, lower than 5 degrees if it's 7, if it's showing 7, and it's definitely not higher than 9 degrees if it's showing 7. That's what it means by it's accurate to within 2 degrees above or below. So I'll draw the diagram here, okay? So I'll just quickly draw a line like this. Give me a moment. I'll just quickly put the increments on. Okay, so I've drawn the like a scale there for both iPads. So let's go to the first one. Okay, so I'm just going to change the color, and let's go with a blue color. So if I look at the first one, it says one reads 7 degrees. So if I have one that is 7 degrees, that means it will be accurate to from 5. So if I have 7 degrees, it will be accurate from 5 to 9. Does that make sense? Right. Now, there's another one that we have, which is 9 degrees, which means it will be accurate between 7 to 11. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then the final one says 10 degrees. So if it's showing 10 degrees, that means it's accurate between 8 to 12. Okay. So if it's showing 10 degrees, it's accurate between 8 to 12. So what does that mean? So that means to find the correct answer, we need to find a temperature where all 3 thermometers overlap, right? Because if this one, so for example, the one that's at the very top, it says, you know, it could be 12 degrees, but the other 2 thermometers don't agree with that, right? So the correct answer is where the 3 thermometers all match up to the same temperatures, like the ranges. So if we look at that, where does it actually overlap, right? So let me once again get a different color. Let's go with maybe, let's say maybe a green. Let's pick a green. And I'm going to just color in where the 3 thermometers all overlap. So if you draw your diagram well, you'll see that the thermometers all overlap here between 8 and 9 degrees. So that means that the temperature has to be somewhere between 8 and 9 degrees. Does that make sense? Just give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, if some people are not putting a thumbs up or putting thumbs down, I'll go through it again. But you have to essentially look for where the 3 thermometers all overlap and agree that it's and agree with each other. So the next one, the last section in problem solving is identifying similarities. So what these questions require you to do is they'll give you data, so information, and they'll present it in more than one way. So for example, in this question, it gives you data in the form of a chart as well as a table down there. And what you need to do is look at the data across different pieces of different mediums. So in this case, the chart and the table, and answer the question that is given. So using this example, it says, Graham recorded the number of visitors to his shop each day last week and presented the results in the bar chart below. So this chart shows you the number of customers in the shop each day. There we go, so that's that. And below it, we have this. So I'll try to zoom out a little bit. So it says, so I've got the options there on the side. I'm not sure if you can all see it, but let's have a look where I'll get the spotlight. This is where I think you can see the red dot on the screen. That's where the options are. What time the shops might have been open that you have to choose from. And so let's go through the question. It says, he recorded the bar chart of how many people came in. And then on the second page, it says, when he calculated the number of customers per hour, he found that he had the same number for 5 of the days. So when he calculated how many customers per hour, so maybe 5 customers per hour, he found that for 5 days it was the same, but for Tuesday and Friday, the 2 days which in the table below, there's question marks there, that it was slightly higher. So maybe it was 3 customers per hour or 4 customers per hour. It was slightly higher. And then so using that information, you have to figure out what are the possible days that it opens. So this is actually a pretty hard question. I would say this is probably the hardest one out of the 10. Because there's a lot of things going on. I think in the selective test, you'll have questions similar to this, but less information going on. Maybe instead of 7 days, maybe they'll only give you 4 days. But I want you to try this question. I'll give you maybe 2-3 minutes. Just put down A, B, C, D, which one you think is the correct answer, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, let's go through it. So before we start off, the correct answer is E. So if you got E, you can give yourself a pat on the back. That's quite a difficult question. So E is the correct answer here. So how do we do this question? You have to look at it. It's one of those questions where you can't dive straight into it. You have to kind of have a look at it, think what's the best way of approaching it. If you do it in the correct manner, it's actually a very, very easy question. So the hard part is find the right way. So let's start. So the main bit of information that you guys all have to remember and must not forget is that the values for Tuesday and Friday were slightly higher than the other days, right? So the values, what it means is how many customers that came in per hour. So, you know, Thursday was 5 customers per hour. On Tuesday and Friday, it might have been, you know, 8 customers per hour. It doesn't matter what it is, but it has to be higher. So that's a key bit of information. If you don't pick up on that, you can't solve the question. So let's start on the Friday one. Let's start on that one. So if we look on Friday here, so looking at the Friday one, you can notice that the number of customers is exactly the same as Thursday and Saturday. But we know that the number of customers that come through per hour has to be more. That means if you compare Thursday and Friday, if they have the same number of customers, that means Friday has to be open for less number of hours because it's getting more customers per hour. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if we look at that, let's have a look at how many hours that it is open on Thursday. So having a look at the Thursday, which is on the chart on the left here. So it goes from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So that means it's open for a total of 10 hours. Okay. So it's open for 10 hours, which means that on the Friday, it can't be open for longer. Oh, sorry, it can't be even open for 10 hours. It has to be less than 10 hours. So let's look at which options is less than 10 hours. So if you look at the option A, Friday is 8 a.m. until 6:30. So that's not correct. Okay, so okay, so it's definitely not A. So let's cross out A. It's definitely not A because Friday is 10.5 hours. Option B, that one is open for about 9.5. So that could be the right answer. Okay, so that could be the right answer. C, it is, let's have a look at C. It goes from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So that one is, once again, that one is 10 hours. So that one is wrong because it has to be less than 10 hours. So let's cross off C. Okay, good. And then let's look at the next one. So D, it's open from 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. So once again, that's open for 10.5 hours. So that one is also wrong. And then the final one, which is E, that could be the correct answer because from 8:30 to 6 p.m., it's 9.5 hours. So it's actually open for less time than Thursday and Saturday, which means if it has the same number of customers, that means it's getting more customers per hour. So now we're left with B and D. So how do we decide which one's the correct one for Tuesday or Thursday? So let's quickly change the color to maybe red here. And I want you to consider the Tuesday and the Thursday and have a look at what you notice between the Tuesday and Thursday. What you'll notice is that the Tuesday, if you look at Thursday, it has 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Yep. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4 available. Not available, sorry, sections there. So let me do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And on Tuesday, there is actually only 3. So that means Tuesday has 3/4 the number of customers compared to Thursday. Now, what does that mean? So that means the number of hours that the shop is open on Tuesday has to be less than 3/4 than how long it was opened on Thursday. So looking at the Thursday, we know it's 10 hours. So someone type in the chat, what is 3/4 of 10 hours? Yep, good. So yep, great, fantastic. Everyone's getting the right answer. So that's really good to see. So people are putting 7.5 hours. So 3/4 of 10 is 7.5. That means Tuesday has to be less than, right? So Tuesday has to be less than 7.5 hours. Okay, so we want Tuesday to be less than 7.5 hours. Now let's have a look at which option is less than 7.5 hours. If we look on, let's see, if we look on Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 4:30, that is 7.5 hours. So we know B is incorrect, okay? We know B is incorrect because it has to be less than 7.5 hours, okay? So it has to be less than 7.5. Now, if we look at Tuesday for option E, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., that's open for 7 hours. So it is less than 7.5 hours, which means that the correct answer will be E. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. Yep, good. I can see some people saying makes sense in the chat, so fantastic. It's actually, some kids will start, you know, looking at different bits of information, looking on the Monday, Sunday, and it gets very confusing. But that you don't need all that information. You have to. These are the types of questions where you have to kind of step back, have a look at it, and approach it in a very strategic way. So this one, essentially, you only needed 3 days. To look at 3 days. You only need to look at Tuesday, which is what they needed, Friday, which is what they needed and wanted you to find out the times for, and Thursday. You actually didn't really need the times for Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. So yeah, these type of questions, you want to have the right approach and not just to dive straight in, because it's quite hard if you start trying to do actual math calculations on these. So I'll give everyone maybe 20 seconds just to write down whatever they want to write down, and then we'll keep going. So this is the critical thinking. So now we've moved on to the next one. So this is critical thinking, identifying main conclusion. For these questions, students need to read a paragraph and be able to summarize and interpret the main idea of the text. So there's actually two types of conclusion questions. There's identifying the main conclusion, and there's also drawing a conclusion. Okay, so what's the difference? So the difference is in identifying the conclusion, which is the one that was above, the conclusion is actually hiding in the paragraph. Now, drawing the conclusion is actually not there, and you have to essentially read the passage and come to a conclusion yourself. The first one is a lot easier because the conclusion is in there, ready for you to find it. So let's do this question. I'll read through it together, and I'll give I'll explain as we go, because I think there will be some concepts in there that might be a little bit tricky for kids, and I'll help you explain that so that you can actually do the question. So it says, vegetarian food can be healthier than a traditional diet. So traditional diet just means, you know, meat, vegetables, maybe KFC on the weekend, you know, some chips, ice cream, you know, cabbage, you know, all a mix of things. So it's saying that vegetarian food can be healthier than traditional diet. Research has shown that vegetarians are less likely to suffer from heart disease and obesity than meat eaters. So it's just saying that people who eat vegetables only and don't eat any meats, that they have less chance of heart disease and obesity. So obesity just means you're overweight, very overweight. Concern has been expressed that vegetarians do not get enough protein in the diet. So it's saying that some scientists or people are worried that if you only eat, if you're a vegetarian, you can't get enough protein, because in meats, you get a lot of proteins, but in a lot of vegetables, there's not enough proteins. But it has been demonstrated that if you select your foods carefully, so if you choose the right foods, you can definitely get enough proteins. So yeah, so it's saying that if you select your foods right, the vegetarians can, people who are vegetarians can get enough protein. So I've just kind of reworded it a little bit just to make it easier. So there's less hard words in there, but yeah, try to pick the correct answer. A lot of kids were already putting the answers in the chat as I was reading it. So I think I'll only wait maybe about 20 seconds and then we'll go through it. But this one, I don't think it will be too hard. These questions, the method that I would recommend is before you look at the answers, have a think about what it was overall trying to talk about. So to answer your questions, the answer is A. So the correct answer is A, everyone. So these questions, you want to have a think about what is it trying to say before you look at the answers. And if I think about it, what the question was really trying to say is vegetarian food, a vegetarian diet can actually be very healthy. And even though some people think it's not healthy because they don't get enough protein, that's not true. So knowing that, let's look at the options. B is adequate protein is available from a vegetarian diet. So that's both right and wrong. It's not 100% correct in the sense that if you don't choose your vegetarian diet correctly, you might not get enough protein. But even if you do choose it correctly, that's not the correct answer, because the point of it was not, the protein part of the argument was just a very small slice of the paragraph. That's not what the whole idea was, what the whole paragraph was trying to talk about. So that's why B is wrong. C, a traditional diet is very high in protein. Yes, that is correct. That could be correct, right? I'm not saying it is correct, because I think if you eat, let's say, chips all day, and you eat 5 packets of chips all day, I don't know if that classifies as a traditional diet, but that wouldn't be very high in protein. But even if it is correct, the big trick that everyone falls into is they start picking the answers which they think is correct. So it's not necessarily the one that's correct. It's the one that is describing the main conclusion. So C could be correct, but that's not what this is talking about. Now, looking at D, a balanced diet is more important in health than any particular food. Now, that option D perfectly encapsulates or perfectly describes the point I was just trying to make. D is a correct option in the sense that a balanced diet is important for health than any particular food. Having a balanced diet, eating all the things you need, that is correct, but that is not what the paragraph is trying to talk about. What the paragraph is trying to talk about is that vegetarian food can be healthier than a regular diet. So that's why D is incorrect. Okay, and E, vegetarians are unlikely to suffer from heart disease and obesity. Yes, that can be correct. They definitely are suffering less heart disease and obesity than meat eaters. But once again, that comes back to the point I was trying to make earlier. That is not what it's trying to talk about. The heart disease and obesity point is just more as a, it's like a tool. It's an argument that they use to argue the whole picture. So for example, if I say, studying is very important, right? It's very important to study hard and get good academic results. And then one of the reasons is so that you can get good academic performances, so you can get into the university and degree and career that you would like to once you become a bit older and know what you want to do. So that is a supporting argument. The point is not that the overall argument is not that you will get into a good degree. The overall argument is it's important to study. The part about getting into a good career and degree is just a kind of like a little, it's like a tool that you use to support your argument, okay? So that's why D and E are wrong. They could be correct, but it's not really about the argument. That's why A is the correct answer. Good, let's move on. So the next one, I've already explained it, by essentially going through the other one. So this one, very similar to the finding the conclusion, but this one is different because the conclusion is not in the given passage. So I want you to read this one. This one's a little bit tricky. I will help you with it because there's a little bit of some concepts in it that might not really make sense. So let's go through it together. So let me just zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole question as well as the options. So the question is, those in favor of coursework contributing to A-level grades. So just imagine A-level grades as overall, right? Just like how your overall mark. Think about it in the selective test. Your selective test has the coursework, which is your schoolwork, and it has the exam work, which is the final test in March. So so it says those in favor of coursework, so things that you do in school, contributing to your final A-level grades, say that it is much fairer than assessments by exam only, as it means that students who are willing to work hard but who perform poorly in exams will have a better chance of doing well. So what it's saying there is, it's saying that if we look at schoolwork, like for example, if I use a selective test example, if we let the selective test, if the selective test, we use a selective test example where if you say school, we should consider the school mark more. Let's not look at the selective test as much, but consider more of the students' school marks. That will be fairer because some students don't do well on the test day, right? Makes sense. However, this arrangement currently allows far more opportunity for cheating, casting doubt on its fairness. So it's saying that it might not be fair because students can cheat. And what does that mean? So let's have a look. It says, for example, there is a growing market for customized essays available for a fee via the internet. So for the selective in primary school, it might not be as important, as irrelevant, but in high school, you have a lot of assignments that you need to give the school. You don't do the test on the day, you do it at home by yourself, and then you hand it in. So it's saying that nowadays, there are a lot of people who are selling essays via the internet. So if you pay them maybe $100, they'll do the assignment for you. At the moment, the only deterrent is a teacher's vigilance. So the only way that a teacher can find out that that it's happening is by their careful observation, by looking carefully, because a teacher might, but while a teacher might identify work which seems atypical, so atypical just means it's not usual for what that student provides, right? So it says, although a teacher might be able to identify work which seems atypical for individual students, they won't necessarily detect when, for example, a student has an unacceptable amount of help from family or friends. So what it's saying is a teacher might be able to recognize when someone else did the work. So for example, if a student says, today I go beach and have ice cream, I like today. And that's the standard of writing, right? And then they hand in an assignment and the assignment says, today I drove down to the beach and had a fabulous day, enjoying the bright sunshine and absorbing the surroundings around me. Now, when a student hands in that piece of work, it becomes very obvious that it's not their piece of work. So it's something where a teacher might be able to see that, but the teacher might not be able to see if a student said, I don't know what to write, and then the parent said, okay, write about going to the beach, maybe talk about what you did there, have a talk about what you did for lunch, had for lunch, and so on. And someone asked what happens if he's improving. Well, yes, kids can improve, but usually it happens over many months, not over one day. So if they did a really bad piece of writing yesterday and then now suddenly it's like a 20 out of 20, it's probably someone else did it for them. So it's something where, yeah, so that's what it's trying to say, where if a parent says, write about this, write about that, and really help them for it, the teacher won't really know because the student still ends up writing it, but it sounds the same as what they normally write. So, good. So what I want you to try to do is do that question. Looking at this one, so the correct answer is A, and let's go through it. So it says, which of the following conclusions is best supported? So remember, the conclusion that they're talking about won't actually be written there in the passage. You actually have to come to that conclusion yourself. So what's the correct conclusion? So assessment by coursework is not necessarily fairer and assessments by examination. So that's the correct answer, but let's back up a little bit and remember what I just said. For these type of questions, I always recommend having a look at the passage and think of the conclusion itself before looking at the options. So if I read it and without looking at the options and I think, well, what is it really talking about here? I think I would say, well, what it's trying to say is some people think that doing a lot of coursework or classwork and using that to calculate final marks is a lot fairer than using tests to calculate final marks, but it's not really the case because people can cheat. So I think that's what it's really saying. So let's see how it matches up. So we already know A is right, so we won't look at that first. B, the opportunities for cheating in coursework means that A levels should be assessed by exams only. So this one, it sounds about right, but that's actually going a little bit too far. The person's actually not saying that we should do exams only, but it's just saying that it's not fair if we make the final mark too heavily dependent on the classwork rather than exam work because people can cheat. But it doesn't say that we should make it 100% exam work because that's going a little bit too far in terms of what it's trying to say. Okay, looking at the other ones. C, traditional exams are still the fairest way of grading A-level students. So that can be, true, like in the sense that, they can't cheat, but it's not really fair for students who just don't do well on the test day, if that makes sense. So it's kind of right, kind of wrong, but even if it was 100% right, that's not what the whole thing is trying to talk about. Okay, the other ones, D, there is no entirely fair way of assessing students at the A level. So that is probably true, but it's something where it's not exactly what it's trying to say here. What it's trying to say is there is no you know, for people who want to do more coursework, more classwork, that's not necessarily the right way to go. Okay. So in E, examinations do not assess how hard a student has worked. That is true, is partly, but it can also show, how do I say, it can also show how hard they've worked, because kids who work hard tend to get higher marks. But once again, it's not talking about what the overall idea is, which is having more coursework is not necessarily fairer than, not necessarily fairer by how, it's not, by putting more, sorry, by putting more coursework in, it's not necessarily fairer than having more exams. Okay, students are required to find a statement which is not supported by evidence that is used to draw a conclusion. So what that means is you have to look in the paragraph, have a look at and find something that is not necessarily true, that they used to come to a conclusion. So let's look at the example. Sam is buying a new car and deciding whether to buy a petrol or a diesel model. And once again, this question uses miles and pounds. It just uses that because Cambridge Assessments is a UK company and they wrote this exam for students in England. So I'll just say kilometers instead of miles, and I'll say dollars instead of pounds. So he knows he will drive 9,000 kilometers each year. And he calculates that if he drives a petrol car, he'll spend $500 per 1,000 kilometers on fuel. But if he buys a diesel model, he'll only spend $300 per 1,000 miles on fuel. He calculates, therefore, that if he purchases a diesel car, then this year he'll be making a saving of $1,800 compared to if he bought the petrol car. So what it's essentially saying is, I'm not sure how many of you kids, I know for the parents at least, they all know that when you go to a petrol station, you'll fill up a car. Usually there's diesel type of fuel and there's petrol type of fuel. There's different types of cars. And here Sam is just deciding which one to buy. And he's done the calculations as to how much it will cost per 1,000 miles for diesel and petrol, and said that, and has made the conclusion that if he buys a diesel car, he will be saving $1,800 per year compared to if you bought petrol. So everyone, the answers are already pouring in, a lot of correct answers. I'm really happy to see that. Good work. Keep doing it. There are some wrong answers as well, but just put in the answers and I'll tell you what the correct answer is. Okay, let me go through it. Now that more kids are putting in answers, I can see more wrong answers. So correct answer is actually E. So the correct answer here is E. Why is that? So he's the conclusion he's made is that by buying a diesel car, he'll save a lot more money. And £1,800, or dollars as I'm calling it, because we're in Australia, exactly is how much he's saving. So, which is not an assumption. So we have to look through each option and see and read it and say, will it affect the end calculation? A, the price of diesel will not fluctuate relative to that of petrol. So it means, will the price of diesel and petrol change over time? Well, to that, yes, it will. We all know that petrol sometimes is $1.10, $1.30, $1.40. It jumps all over the place. And so that is an assumption that can affect his calculations. So correct, that is an assumption. B, the cars will have the same initial purchase cost. Now, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit here. We know that the diesel model saves a bit on petrol, but let's say, so it saves a bit more money than petrol, but let's say a petrol car typically on average costs, let's say $30,000, okay? And let's just say for argument's sake, I'm gonna exaggerate here, the average diesel car costs $1 million, okay? There's a bit of an exaggeration, but let's say it costs $1 million. Now, even if petrol is a bit more expensive than diesel, no matter how much you drive, diesel is really going to still be more, buying a diesel car is going to be so much more expensive because that diesel car on average costs $1 million rather than $30,000, if that makes sense, right? So as a result, B, correct, is also another assumption. Let's look at the next one. C, cars will have the same cost for maintenance and garage expenses. Once again, that is another assumption. If the petrol, you just store in your car, your garage, sorry, and you don't have to really do anything, you service it once a year. But say, for example, if the diesel, I'm not saying it is, but if it was, you had to service it once a month, and each time it costs it was a very high, very expensive and costs a lot, then suddenly any savings on petrols is going to get diminished or taken away by the maintenance cost. So once again, C is also true. It is also an assumption, right? D, the cars will use the same amount of fuel, right? So once again, That's right. That's another assumption. So the petrol car may actually use less fuel than a diesel car. So even though diesel is $3,000 per 1,000, not $300 per 1,000 kilometers, it will be a lot more expensive because it uses a lot more fuel. Maybe a diesel car might use 20 liters per kilometer, while a petrol car might only use 2 liters per kilometer. Once again, I'm making up numbers, but if the diesel car used a lot more, even though per liter it's cheaper for diesel, because you're using so much more liters per kilometer, you're going to end up with a much higher payment of, not payments of, you're going to end up spending a lot more money paying for diesel fuel rather than petrol. Does that make sense? Yep. Essentially, the concept is just, even though it's cheaper per liter, but if it takes a lot more liters per kilometer, you end up spending more. Okay, so the correct answer is E. A, B, C, D are all assumptions. Okay, so the correct answer there is E. All right, great. I think we have another 4 questions, so let's keep going. We're actually doing pretty well for time. So assessing the impact of additional evidence. So this one, it gives you an argument, right? And then afterwards, it throws in a bit of a fact in there, and you have to pick which fact is really different, not really different, but is different to what they're talking about. But not only is it different, but it affects the argument, right? Does that make sense? So let's go through it. So let's read this one. I'll explain what I mean when we go through this example. It says, polar bears in captivity frequently engage in obsessive patterns of behavior, pacing back and forth on the same spot, swinging their heads from side to side, and other signs of stress. So what it means is polar bears that are held in captivity, so they're captive in like zoos, maybe I guess not circus shows, but mainly in zoos. I think that's what they're talking about. Frequently engage, so frequently do obsessive patterns. So obsessive patterns are things that they do over and over again, such as walking back and pacing back and forth, so walking back and forth in the same spot, swinging their heads from side to side, and other signs of stress. They do this even when living in areas that are quite spacious. So what it means is, even if you give them a zoo, which has many kilometers, square kilometers of area for them to walk in, they still do the same thing. What this shows is that conditions of captivity are not a satisfactory substitute for the natural environment of the polar bear species. So what it's saying is, because they seem very stressed out in zoos, we cannot keep polar bears within these captive environments, and that's what it's trying to say. Now the question is, which of the following, if true, would most weaken the above argument? Okay, so once again, 1 or 2 minutes, pick the answer you think is correct. Which one pretty much is like a good rebuttal, which you can tell to the other person and say, you're wrong, that's not correct. So which fact what does that most effectively? So a couple minutes. Okay, let's go through it. So correct answer is B. And a lot of students actually pick C and then end up changing it to B. But let's go through it one by one. I'll talk about B at the end. Let's go through all the wrong answers one by one, and I'll explain to you why they are incorrect. So option A, polar bears are ill-suited to a life in captivity. Well, that one actually is not the correct answer because it supports the argument. It doesn't actually weaken the argument. You want to pick one where it looks at the above argument and says, you're wrong, it's not correct. But that one actually supports it because the original argument is saying that we shouldn't keep polar bears in zoos or in captivity. So A is wrong because it doesn't weaken it, it actually supports it. Let's skip B and let's go to C. This is the one that a lot of students picked, okay? So polar bears in captivity are much better fed than those in wild. Okay, can you see how this actually doesn't directly attack that argument? It actually dances around it. So it says polar bears in captivity are much better fed than those in the wild. So it's saying that we can keep them. Is what it's trying to say is we can keep it in captivity, we can keep it in zoos, we give them better food, but it doesn't attack it. It doesn't attack it. And you'll see what I mean. Once I get to option B, you can see how it exactly attacks the other argument. Now looking at option D, it says polar bears in the wild cover many miles a day when they're hunting for food, right? So it's saying that, once again, this one's wrong because it supports the other argument. sorry, not the other one, the original argument, because it's saying that, you know, we shouldn't keep it, you know, in the zoos, we should let it roam free, because D, the polar bears walk many, many miles a day when they're hunting for food. So D actually supports it and doesn't actually argue against it. So it doesn't weaken it, okay? Yeah. And then E, polar bears which have been reared in captivity, so raised in captivity, are incapable of surviving in the wild. In terms of some, so in terms of that one, once again, that one is dancing around the argument. It doesn't directly attack it. So for that one, what it's saying is, you know, if we put them in the zoos, later on we can't put them in the wild because they can't survive. So yeah, but it doesn't really directly attack the argument. So what I mean by that is, if you look at B, it says many polar bears in the wild engage in obsessive patterns of behavior. So let's think about that for a moment and why that actually weakens argument. Because if you look at the original argument, what it was saying is polar bears in zoos are shaking their head all the time. They are, you know, they're walking in the same spots over and over all the time, and they're really feeling a lot of stress. So when they keep them in zoos, so we shouldn't keep them in zoos, right? So that's its argument. But if you put in B and say B was true, many polar bears in the wild also show signs of stress and you know, have obsessive patterns of behavior. What that means is when the polar bears might just be stressed, they're stressed animals. They just do those sort of things naturally. They just swing their heads from side to side. They walk back and forward in the same spot. That's just what polar bears do. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are stressed because they are in the zoos. They might, you know, be in the zoos and love it there. They get, you know, all this fish. They get the best fish. A lot of other, you know, polar bears are there. They never get starved. There's no other animals trying to hunt them or attack them. It's brilliant. But they just swing their heads and walk back and forth just because that's what polar bears do, right? So detecting reasoning errors. So what you have to do here is identify the flaw in the given argument. So this one, once again, not a super easy question, but let's do it and I'll explain it. Once I explain it, it will make sense. So it says, some people attempt to smuggle a pet. What is smuggling? So that means to secretly bring in. So for example, if you wanted to bring in a rainbow lorikeet into, let's say, New Zealand, and they said, no, you can't bring one in, you might just you know, put your rainbow lorikeet in your backpack and try to walk through the airport. That's called smuggling. So some people attempt to smuggle a pet into Britain. And just a side note, the reason why you can't bring some pets or plants or foods through into a new country is because sometimes those pets have diseases and you know, mainly diseases, which if you bring in, like for example, like COVID-19, right? So some people in, you know, America, so China, America, and other countries, when it's, you know, initially started off, or it started in China, when they went to other countries, they started, you know, spreading the disease, and it became a really big problem. So it can happen with animals as well. So if some animals, in this example, it's talking about rabies. If you go into the other, you know, countries and you bring a dog in with rabies and it spreads it to other dogs, what happens is you get a lot of dogs with rabies, and it's not good because I'm not sure if you're aware, but almost no one who got bitten by a, you know, like a dog with rabies or another animal with rabies actually survived it if they didn't get the vaccine. Rabies is one of those diseases where it has literally a 100% death rate if a human gets it and doesn't get what they call it is like prophylactic vaccination. So something they give you to stop it from affecting you. So that's why it's very important that we don't bring rabies into the a country. So let's keep reading. So it says, some people try to attempt to smuggle a pet into Britain because of the quarantine regulations, which are aimed at preventing rabies from entering the country. So it's saying that sometimes they're quarantine regulation. That means you can't bring in certain animals. So some people try to sneak it in. If there was no such regulations, there would be no reason for people to smuggle pets. So it's saying if the government said, yeah, bring in all the animals you want, bring in anyone, any pet, dog, cat, alligator, snake, anything, bat, anything you want, just bring it in. People won't smuggle pets anymore. Makes sense, right? Because if the government doesn't say you can't bring in pets, there's no such thing as smuggling, because you can only smuggle a pet in if they don't let you, you know, bring it in, right? So since the most likely source of rabies outbreak in Britain is a smuggled pet, if the quarantine regulations were abolished, so if it's saying that because most of the animals that bring in rabies into Britain are from smuggled pets, if we just said that you can bring in whatever pet you want and we no longer have rules and there's no such thing as smuggling, we will no longer have rabies in Britain. So that's what it's saying. So to shorten it, a lot of animals that are smuggled in and snuck in, pets, have rabies. They spread rabies to the country. If we say you can bring in any animal you want, that means there's no more smuggled animals, and that means there will be no more rabies. Have a think about what it's saying there, and before you look at the options, have a think about what doesn't quite make sense there. There's something in there that doesn't really make sense, and pick the right answer that you think best describes that. So the correct answer is C. So if you put C, great work. So why is it C? So let's have a look at it. So the illogical argument that they've put forward is the fact that if you stop any bans or stop any quarantine bans on certain animals, that now you let everyone bring in their own pet, whatever it is, there'll be no rabies. That's a problem, because say for example snakes, let's say bats have rabies, right? Let's say a lot of bats have rabies, and you bring in a lot of people bring in bats into Britain for pets, right? And then suddenly, Britain, UK says no, you can't bring in bats because they have rabies. So a lot of people sneak in the bats. That's where all the rabies are coming from. Now, if tomorrow they say, okay, you're allowed to bring in bats, we're not going to ban them anymore. You can bring in all the bats. You can bring it in. It's not smuggling. The bats don't just magically not have rabies anymore. Does that make sense? Right? So if they say you can bring in all the bats you want, bring in all the animals you want, those bats will still have rabies if you bring it in. So you're no longer smuggling them in. You're legally bringing those bats and other animals in, but they're all coming in with rabies. That's where the logical, what they call is the logical fallacy, the mistake. That's where the mistake is. If you abolish the bans and people can legally bring in animals, that there's going to be no rabies anymore, okay? Because those bats that were previously banned yesterday but are now allowed today, they will still have the rabies. That's why C is the correct answer. If there were no quarantine regulations, pets with rabies could still enter Britain easily, right? Make sense? So if it makes sense, just say yes. All right, so matching arguments. These ones, I won't show you the technique on how to do these ones, but I'll let you try to do it and then see how you go. So students are given an argument and they need to choose from several options and identify another argument that follows the same logical structure. So all they do here is they give you an argument, such as the one below, so we'll read it in a moment, and you have to pick another argument that follows the same structure. So the question is, I cannot get any answer when I dial my mother's number, mother's phone number. Either she is not answering her phone or she has decided to stay away on holiday for an extra week. She must still be away. Let me just expand it so you can see the other questions below as well. She must be away because, either she's not answering her phone or she has decided to stay away on holiday for an extra week. She must still be away because she would never let her phone ring without answering. So in short, what it's saying is, my mum's not picking up my phone number, my phone calls. Either she's not answering her phone or she's going on holiday for even longer. She's decided to stay overseas for holiday even longer. She must be on holiday because she never not picks up her phone, right? So pick the one that you think matches that, and then we'll go from there. Okay, let's go through this one. So in terms of how do you actually do these sort of questions? So, well, let's go through the correct answer. I'll tell you what the right answer is first, because I know all of you want to know what it is. The correct answer is C for this one. So how do you do this? So a lot of you probably just read it and was like, and were like, okay, which one matches and kind of sounds the same. But just like all the other math questions, reading comprehension, GA questions, there is a special way to do these, which will make your life a lot easier and help you get the answer more accurately. So what it is you have to kind of label certain items, right? So let's read it carefully and I'll label as we go. So I cannot get any answer when I dial my mother's number. Either she is not answering her phone. So, sorry, let me just get the pen. So either she is not answering her phone. So let me underline that. So either she's not answering her phone. So I've underlined she's not answering her phone. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to essentially label that one as X. Okay? And I'm going to label, yeah, so that is X. So either she is not answering her phone or she has decided to stay away for an extra week of holidays, right? So, or she has decided to stay away for an extra week of holidays. So I'm just going to label that as Y in green. So it says she must be away, okay? Because she would never not answer her phone. So what the question is saying is, you know, something's happening. It's either X or Y. It must be Y because it's not X. Can you guys see that kind of thought pattern? Yeah. So these are questions. It's really easy to use. You can do it very easily by using letters to substitute these type of statements, the statements that they have in there. So now we want to look at which one is the correct one and how it follows it. So I won't go through the wrong ones because when you do this process, it will just give you all the wrong ones. But I'll show you why C is, was it C? Let me have a look at the correct answer. I think I looked at the wrong one. Yeah, C is the answer. So I'll show you why C is the correct answer and I'll draw it up. So let's use blue. Yeah. So C is the correct answer. So it says, Joe is looking a lot fitter, right? Either he has cut down on his eating. So if we say cut down on his eating is X, okay? So cut down on his eating is X. And let's change the other one to maybe, let's say yellow, okay? So the other one is yellow. Or he's been running every day. So I'll underline that one in yellow and just call it Y. So it's saying either he has cut down on his eating or he's been running every day. So cutting down on his eating is X or he's been running every day is Y. I know for a fact that Joe couldn't keep a diet. So what it's saying here is that we know it's not X. We know he's not eating, he can't control his diet. So we know he can't control what he's eating. So it must be exercise that's done it, right? So can you see how it follows the same structure? So it's saying, Joe is looking a lot fitter. It's either X or Y. It must be Y because it's not X. Okay, so applying principles. Students need to understand the principle that underpins an argument and apply that principle to another argument. So it gives you something that, some argument that it's making. You have to kind of understand, okay, why is it really saying that? What's the logical reasoning that the writer has used to come to that conclusion? And which of the options uses a very similar type of, logical thought pattern? So let's look at the options, and don't comment your answers just yet because there's still another 3 options that are not on the screen. So which one of the following best illustrates the principle underlying the argument above? So let's read through it. So smokers who suffer from heart disease, which is caused by their smoking, should not be allowed to get free health treatment. So for example, in Australia, and I think in the UK, as it seems like according to this question, if you get sick, you just go to your, Westmead Hospital, Blacktown Hospital, St. Vincent's Hospital, any hospital. You go there, say, I'm hurting here, or this is wrong, fix me. They'll do it for free, okay? But what it's saying here is, smokers who get heart disease because of their smoking should not get this free health treatment. They need to pay, okay? That is because, right? It's saying that is because this is an example of a self-inflicted illness. So this is an illness that they've self-inflicted. That means they've caused it to themselves. Those whose actions have caused illness or injury to themselves should make a financial contribution to their treatment. So what it means is it's saying that people who have caused the disease to themselves, it wasn't by chance. So sometimes, people get illnesses like asthma, you're just bad luck, right? Just bad luck. There's nothing you did wrong. It just happens, just bad luck. And it's saying those people should get free treatment, but for people who, didn't, it wasn't bad luck, they caused themselves, like smoking, they heart disease, they get lung cancer, things like that, they should pay for their own treatment. So that's what it's saying. Now, which of the following options, A, B, C, D, E, best illustrates the same principle underlying the argument above? So pick the one that you think is the correct answer. I'll tell you what the answer is. The answer is E. Good. So why is it E? So let's go through one by one, and I'll tell you why A, B, C, D are not right, and then I'll explain why E is right. Just to recap and to refresh, the argument that I was saying was, if you caused a health problem and you caused it to yourself, like smoking and heart disease, it's your fault and you should pay for it and you shouldn't get free treatment. That's what it's saying. Okay, so let's look at A, B, C, D, and let's see why they are wrong. So A, children should get free dental treatment even if they eat sweets which cause dental decay. So I think a lot of kids have gone to the dentist before, ate one too many lollies, didn't brush their teeth, and now they have holes in their teeth, and then you need to get your teeth fixed. So why is A wrong? It's wrong because it's actually the opposite, right? Because here it's saying people should still get free treatment even if they cause their own, right? Even if they cause their own disease, which is dental decay in this example. Okay, so that's why A is wrong, because it actually is opposite. It's saying they should even get free treatment even if they cause it to themselves. Okay, so that's A. B, heart disease sufferers who can afford to pay for health treatment should not receive free treatment. Why is this wrong? Because this one, it's not saying if you cause the disease to yourself, you should, pay for your treatment. It's saying if you're wealthy and you can afford it, you should pay for it. But if you can't afford it, you should get it for free. That's why that one's wrong. Does that make sense? So that one is wrong because, right, it's not saying if you cause the disease to yourself, you don't get free treatment. It's saying if you can afford it, you don't get free treatment. So it's a different argument. Okay, so B is wrong because of that. For C, it says smokers who cannot afford to pay for healthcare should be allowed free treatment when they are ill. So once again, this one is not in the same, it doesn't have the same argument, right? It's saying that it's something where it's saying that if you get sick because you smoke and you can't afford it, you should pay. You should not pay, sorry. You should get it for free. So that one's wrong because the original one flat out just says, if you cause it to yourself, doesn't matter if you can afford it or if you can't afford it, you don't get it for free. You have to pay. So that's why C is not correct. Okay. D, people who are injured in car accidents should receive free treatment regardless of whether they were wearing a seatbelt or not, right? That one's wrong because that one is saying essentially, if you don't wear a seatbelt and you get in a car crash, you're probably going to go flying out the front window and have really bad injuries. What it boils down to is, it doesn't matter if it's your fault or not, you should get free treatment. Okay, does that make sense? Right? So that's why it's not D. For E, that's a correct answer because it's saying motorcyclists whose head injuries are caused by not wearing a crash helmet should make a financial contribution to the treatment. So it's saying if you're riding a motorcycle and you have a head injury and you weren't wearing a helmet, you have to make some sort of payment for your treatment. Makes sense, right? Because the original one's saying if you were smoking and you caused yourself heart disease, you should pay for it. Here it's saying if you were riding a bike and you got a crash and you caused it to yourself because you weren't wearing a helmet, you should pay for it. Okay, so if it makes sense, just say yes. Yeah, so those are the 10 different types of questions that you'll get. It's broken into problem-solving skills and also critical thinking skills, which you can see on the right-hand side here on this page where we've just gone week 1, week 2, week 3. Those are the different topics that the Cambridge assessments actually have published on their website and say this is what the different types of questions we put in thinking skills. As I mentioned before, for the selective test, you can expect something similar because the Cambridge assessments, they're a company that they write questions based on previous research. They're not going to just randomly come up with anagrams, sentences, jumbled sentences. They're going to only include questions which they've proven that they show intelligence, which are these ones here. So that's what we're doing. So for parents who interested, we will run classes similar to this. Previously, I was going to run them regular classes like all our WMG, SCTC classes face-to-face, but when I polled the parents and see how many were interested, it was easily in the 70, 80, 90s. And so we don't have space, unfortunately, to run it. So we'll run it like this. The classes won't be as big as the one like the seminars here today. They will, it will be a lot smaller, but it won't be exactly the small group classes as well. It'll be somewhere in between. I would expect maybe about 20, 15, 20, hopefully around there. If it gets too large, like if it gets something crazy like 35, 40, it's something where we would just split into more classes. So 2 hours per week, $44 per week, conducted via Zoom. So just like today, so the way that we conducted it, except the differences will be, we'll actually unmute kids and let them interact and keep it interactive. I know today it's a seminar, so it's something where when we have, 140, 150 across the 2 iPads I'm using, it's something where like we can't keep it interactive, but the sessions will be interactive, and it will be written based on existing TSA. So we're not making stuff up, not just sitting there thinking what topics can we make. It will be exactly from what TSA has. It will be their preparation materials. We'll just be making them a lot easier, right? So we'll be adjusting questions to make them easier, and we've already started on that, and it will cover every topic in the Cambridge Assessment's Thinking Skills guide. So on the right-hand side, you can see the different topics that we're going to be covering there. So that's that. In terms of what times we'll be running them and who's teaching them. So it will be run at these times. There's a link there. The enrollment form is already live, so you can actually enroll if you want to just type in that